Converted Man here.
In this video, I'll be analyzing 78 Answers for Fundy Atheists Part 2.
Okay, folks, it's time for Part 2, but I'm going to switch things up a bit. One thing I've learned from these answers series for sure is that you can't count on Fundy Atheists to do any serious research about your claims and arguments.
Well, I have an idea. Rather than make us do research, why not just, provide the research? Say, here's a link to this, here's a link to that, here a link, there a link, everywhere a link. But I guess it's just easier for you to make claims and then expect us to see if your claims are true. Okay, so, alright.
At most, they'll ask you a bunch of dumb questions. Then when you answer them, they'll ask 3 times more dumb questions showing how little they understood what you said.
Well, then try to explain it in a way that people can comprehend. Again, if they're asking for your sources because you didn't give them, then maybe give them your sources next time so that they won't be asking you where you came up with idea X, Y, or Z. Just an idea. Just supporting your arguments with documentation could be a thing. Now, if it's a logically coherent argument, you might not have to do that because the argument would stand or fail on its own. But this presentation is not a persuasionary dialogue. It's set up as if it's an information exchange dialogue, which means you do have to show the sources for what you're saying. And if you fail to do so, then people are going to ask what you might call dumb questions. And then if you explain to them the answers, but again fail to document that, then you might receive even more questions that also seem dumb to you because you did not provide the information that you should have.
The classic example happened in Part 1 of this series, where a bunch of them had this idea that I just made up the whole template of honor and shame.
Well, I've never heard of the template of honor and shame, so did you make that up? I guess I would have to go back to Part 1. So what resources do we have to verify that this is not a made-up idea? No, you're not going to tell us that in this video. Just that's the example. Okay, moving on.
So this means what for this time? Well,
if your child was dying, and I hope that never happens, I seriously hope that never happens, would you just pray for them, or would you take them to a doctor?
Yeah, you can see where this is all going. It's the same old story we've had a few times before here, on prayer. The last time I pointed this out, a lot of Fundy Atheists didn't pay attention, so I'm going to put it in their face this time, okay?
What's wrong with your face? Don't put it in my face, man. My face does things like breathing for me.
Hey Christians, this is Michigan. This is how I'm talking about answer prayer. Jesus is extraordinarily more promises about prayer. What I give you, that's Man, this is a lot more complicated than I thought. I'm just afraid of being eaten by a monster, even in heaven.
Oh, did you pray that?
Of course not, I'm an atheist.
I don't know why I didn't see it before. Thanks, red furry monster thingy, for pointing it out to me. I just didn't understand it before. Only pious people will get their prayers answered, and only if that prayer is in line with God's will. No idea if that's the real way to interpret the Bible, but you're the expert, red furry thing, and I'm just a blonde. These people pray, perhaps, to God, peacefully, and their prayers will probably not be answered. Unless God happens to pick those prayers to be answered, but only particularly if it's in God's will. So basically what we're saying here is anything that happens because these people happen to pray for it was in God's will, and anything that they prayed for, even though they were pious and didn't get answered, was because that wasn't in God's will. See? So there's zero way to falsify it.
Okay, with that in mind, let's answer the questions.
If your child was dying, and I hope that never happens, I seriously hope that never happens, would you just pray for them, or would you take them to a doctor?
Definitely, take them to the doctor. Prayer? Well, that's up to you.
Okay, so we know the doctor works. We know that that can actually produce a result. Although sometimes it doesn't. But we know that the chances of it producing a result are good. As far as the prayer thing, it doesn't seem to have any impact at all, because we don't know that we are pious, however you want to say that, and we don't know if it's in God's will to heal that person, making prayer somewhat irrelevant. And later on, he'll explain that prayer isn't about asking for things anyway. So, don't bother to pray, at least not for that person. I mean, maybe you could pray just to establish your place in the hierarchy of where you belong according to God or something, I guess, and maybe that will make God happy, and then maybe God will help the person. But really, prayer just doesn't seem to matter as far as helping your loved one. So, doctor, yes. Prayer, screw it.
You both. Which one do you think has more of an impact?
So yeah, here's the false premise again, that the purpose of both of these things is to make an impact.
And you've already made this point, so you don't need to keep making it over and over again and get stuck in an infinite loop or something. Only certain people are allowed to do that, like me. I'm allowed. I did that last in my other video that you won't watch. But my viewers, see, this is an inside joke that they'll get, but you won't. And you've already made this point, so you don't need to keep making it over and over again and get stuck in an infinite loop or something. Only certain people are allowed to do that, like me. I'm allowed. I did that last in my other video that you won't watch. But my viewers, see, this is an inside joke that they'll get, but you won't. And you've already made this point, so you don't need to keep making it over and over again and get stuck in an infinite loop or something. Only certain people are allowed to do that, like me. I'm allowed. I did that last in my other video that you won't watch. But my viewers, see, this is an inside joke that they'll get, but you won't.
If you paid attention to the vid we just showed, you know that's not what prayer is for.
Well, now I know that's not what prayer is for, because you clarified it for me, Moose Squirrel thingy. Thanks so much for doing that. Actually, you didn't clarify that for me. That red monster that eats atheists did.
Whose prayers does God answer?
This is not something you really answer that simply, though. As I said in that prior vid, only the pious who knew God's will expected a positive answer to prayer, because the point of prayer wasn't to ask for stuff.
Well, a lot of Christians are getting this wrong. They think that prayer is to ask for stuff, and they need to be told that that's not what prayer is for. Even if that's what Jesus seems like he's telling them sometimes, or that Yahweh is telling them sometimes, clearly prayer is not for getting things. And you need to tell the Christians that they're wrong about that. And perhaps the atheist in the video is talking to those Christians, not to you who has the, quote, right, and quote, understanding of the Bible. So he is trying to change their minds about what they believe. And you're not telling them that they're wrong. So you're not doing what he's doing, for whatever reason.
If it's ultimately his will, why even bother praying?
As that prior vid says, you bother in order to show your proper place in a patronage relationship, not to ask for stuff.
Possibly pious people can please God by prayer, but perhaps you shouldn't pray expecting pleasant potentials. So please pray only to please God, but not to get things. Why aren't you picky? So, it's the right attitude. If you don't know what God's will is, don't pray for stuff. Okay, got it. Let's put that on the screen.
If you have cancer, what would help you more? Certain drugs or prayer?
Yeah, basically the same question as the first one we covered this time. Just a different topic.
Let's say you had an amputated limb. Would prayer ever bring it back?
Yeah, well, you know where this one comes from. And just for the record and for fun, let's see my prior answer again. Once again, bear with us while we hold a bottle to the mouths of the Fundy Atheists.
Hold on. I think I can save you the time and trouble here. If you don't know God's will, don't ask for stuff. And only pious people perhaps please pray possible porcupines. In other words, only the pious can pray for stuff. But that's not what prayer is for. So prayer is not for getting stuff sometimes, unless you're pious and knew what God's will was. And if God's will was to give you something, then prayer is to get stuff. Alright, so if you don't know God's will, don't ask for stuff. Pious people know, I guess, God's will. Prayer is not for getting stuff, unless it is. God's will might be to give you stuff, but you will only know that if you're pious. So if God's will is to give and you are pious, then you can ask for X, whatever X might be. Everyone got it? Good! Okay, moving on.
Most Christians believe that God is curing cancers.
Whoa! See this vid? Let's get some things straight. I don't go in for this on-demand right-now view of prayer these nutballs think represents the reality. Yeah, I know, you got lackeys like this character who think that's the way prayer works. I know that. But you want the serious biblical grasp on prayer? That's not who you go to. You want to know where these guys who made that website went for their views on Christian prayer? Take a guess. Yeah, real professional sources there.
Hold on. Are you saying that Guideposts and that woman who I don't recognize by face alone is not a professional source? What makes something professional and not in theology anyways? Is William Lane Craig a professional source of information? Who gets to decide who's a professional source of information? How does that work anyways? Oh, we're not going to address any of that. And I don't know whether or not Does God Heal Amputees got their information from those sources or not, and I really don't care. What I do care about is that many Christians, as well as other people of other religions, believe that the power of prayer can heal their kids or themselves, and therefore will not go to the doctor and get the right medication and right treatment for whatever ails them and suffer and perhaps die. That's a real thing.
Oh, now this refers to a poll of doctors. Well, I don't know or care what polls say, but if you want the best and most scholarly treatment of whether miracles take place today, including medical ones, this 2-volume set by a scholar named Craig Keener is the bomb, okay?
Hold on. I have a question about the poll, because yes, you can object to a poll depending on who took it and what it was about, but if it's polling actual real doctors, then that is a good source of information. What do those doctors believe, and how are they treating their patients based on that belief? Are their doctors just putting their hands on patients saying, "Be healed," and the patient is being healed? Or do doctors not favor that sort of treatment because, I don't know, it doesn't work? And why would I think that this book that you think is good is a good book about miracles and miracle healings that you just said probably don't take place at all, because only pious people can pray, and only if it's in line with God's will does it happen. So how can someone document something like that? Oh, we're not going to get any answers to those questions. I guess I'm just asking some stupid questions because I don't understand what you're saying. Go on then with the video. Maybe you explain it later. He doesn't.
It's a little dishonest to compare prayer for the curing of cancer to prayers for lost legs to regrow. I mean, let's face it, losing limbs isn't a pleasant thing, sure. But in the end, it doesn't threaten your life, and it ain't going to kill you the way a cancer could.
That's not true. You could die from a loss of a limb in any number of ways. If you lose a limb, you could die from the blood loss right then and there on the scene. You could die later from complications, say gangrene or other infections due to the loss of the limb. You could decide that life isn't worth living and kill yourself